Good afternoon everybody, I'm here at Growing Together Westcliff, it's Matt here, and I'm really excited because I'm in a bee suit for the first time ever actually, and I'm going to be talking to Richard from Essex Bees, and he's going to be showing us the lovely beehives at Growing Together. They look very busy at the moment, there's lots of bees buzzing in and out, and yeah, Richard's got a huge amount of information, a huge amount of knowledge about working with bees. So hopefully some of you will be able to join us and ask us questions about the bees and join in and find out about the bees here at Growing Together, the lovely honey that they make and what they do. So I'll just switch the camera over to Richard and say hello Richard.
Good afternoon everyone.
So you've got a nice smoker there.
Smoker. This is designed by the Victorians and never been improved upon. Basically it burns stuff. I use cardboard, people use different things. We use this to calm the bees down. Within a hive it's very dark, so everything's done by smell. So by wafting smoke in, it masks the scents within the hive, the panic scent, and then we just, hopefully they stay calm, we just carry on. So we need one of these. We need one of these, which is a hive tool. It's basically a glorified chisel. And this pries the hive apart because it's all glued up with wax and propolis, which is a tree sap. And as Matt says, we wear a bee suit because, to be honest, it's no fun getting stung. Bee suits actually aren't sting proof, but they give you a sense of confidence, I suppose, more than anything else. And the veils that you put over the top do actually keep them off of your face, because when bees get angry, they go for your wrists, your head or your ankles. So I've got boots on, Matt hasn't, so because the bees have got to his ankles. So what I'm going to do is open one of the hives up and hopefully find a queen to show you. Hopefully I will. She's got some paint on her back, so she should be identifiable. It won't be a full check because that takes a while, but until I find the queen I may have to lift up a few frames and I'll point a few things out on some of them as we go along. So as long as this smoke doesn't go out, we'll be okay. So we now get suited and booted and we wander over, trying to keep our social distance. Some people don't wear bee suits, some people don't wear gloves. I'm too old to be macho now, so I will continue being a wimp. So if I do get stung, it shouldn't hurt too much because it's got to go through a layer of clothing. As it happens, I don't get stung that often, so today could be famous last words. People that carry cameras, they sometimes get stung.
Let's hope they're nice and calm today. So I've got my bee suit on, as you can see if I switch the camera. Here we are, very stylish. Yeah, so I'll hopefully try not to get stung. Hi Kirsty, hi Ben, hi Barry, nice to see you. So we're going to go over to the beehives, and I unfortunately put Crocs on this morning which have got holes in the bottom, so hopefully we won't get too stung. I think I'll keep largely at a distance and then just go in to see some close-ups, so I'll turn it back round. Here's our wonderful beehives, which we've had for quite a few years, Richard, haven't we?
We have, yeah, about 4 or 5 years. And when they first came, this was quite an open area. But the trees have grown now, so it's a little bit more comfy. So this year, actually, for winter, I will have to cut some of the branches back because otherwise it creates a damp environment over the winter. And bees don't like the damp. They can withstand cold, but they don't like damp. So we have to make sure we stop that. These are the hives. They're all much of a muchness, believe it or not. Some are made of wood, some are made of polystyrene. I'm going to open the polystyrene hive today because they're a bit calmer. The ones on the far end in the blue box, they're actually the best bees at the moment in terms of the amount of honey going on board, but they're a bit feisty, so we don't want to upset anybody. And we shall start. So what you do when the beekeeper turns up, he tries not to stand in the way of the flight path, otherwise they all gang up on him, as Matt may find out in a minute. We let them know we're coming, so I give them a waft of smoke through the entrance. There's guard bees on security detail there, so what happens is they've now had a waft of smoke in their face, so hopefully they're going to calm down a little bit. And then we start. when we open a hive up, you don't just open it, you can just open it up to have a look, but normally we're doing it for a reason. This time of the year we're there to make sure there's a queen in there. We're doing it to make sure they're not thinking of swarming, and we're doing it to see if hopefully there's some honey coming in. So that's what we're doing. This is just a cover board, they're wooden on some hives. This top bit is where the honey goes that we harvest. We don't bother checking that. The longer you're in the hive, the angrier they get.
Yeah, they're definitely beginning to swarm. There's quite a few of them now.
The noise you can hear is actually the bees' wings flapping. They're not going buzz buzz with their mouth, it's actually the wing. This is a queen excluder. And what this is, it's a plastic mesh. And it actually stops the queen who lives in this bit, in the living area, from going up into the honey and laying eggs. You don't want that. You just want the honey to be pure honey without eggs in it, otherwise it tastes funny. So put that down. On my hives, I try and have as big a amount of bees in there as I possibly can. So this box here is called a brood box, and it's the normal size living chamber. I add another box on top, which increases the overall size, volume by 50%. Means more bees can live in there, means there's less chance of swarming, in my opinion, and it also means that the bees basically can increase their numbers. The more bees you've got in a single colony, the more chance you've got of getting a good honey crop. That's the theory. At the moment, there's probably only about 40,000 bees in here.
Only 40,000.
About 60,000, but unfortunately, last winter, on all these 4 hives, I forgot to put mouse guards on them. And what happened is, over the winter, mice actually crept through these narrow holes and tried to set up nests, and they chewed some of the frames. I've left one in there so you can see it later. But that doesn't do the bees any favours. They get into a bit of shock and they don't do much. So what we do with the hook, we take the first frame out carefully, because otherwise if we take it out roughly, what happens is the bees can get rubbed. Quite calm. This stuff here, these are baby bees in here that are covered with a wax, and around the outside you'll see there's honey. Okay. On the flip side, this is the beginnings of a swarm cell. This is where a queen, it's normally up that way, this is where a queen would sometimes be formed, and after 9 days they would then actually, once this is actually fully developed, half the hive would actually swarm away. So as a beekeeper, you vandalise it, you just basically rip it apart. The first one, I can't see the queen on there, the first one you lay down. Some people say don't put it on the ground, but I do. Lots of beekeepers have got their own way of doing things, so we tend to ignore each other and do what we think suits. Now on here, this is all honey. Not sure if you can see the glistening stuff. So the stuff with the capping over it is the nectar they've now converted to proper honey. And the glistening stuff is going to be honey as well, but it's got too much water in it, so they're evaporating the water off so that the honey actually doesn't ferment. So when we harvest it, it all has to be solid like this, because otherwise it goes fizzy in the it tastes rank. So, the longer you're in a beehive, the more upset you get. Again, they're quite calm at the moment, hopefully they stay that way. These are all females. They do all the work. They're actually called worker bees, and they do all the work. These bees will only live about 6 weeks in the summer, and as soon as they hatch, they start cleaning the hive, and then they go through various jobs. They become nurse bees. Within the hive, they move food around, nectar and pollen around. After about 2 weeks, they go on guard duty, security, and that's where they're protecting against anything attacking them, like hornets. See these knobbly ones here, you can actually see they've got a slight dome on them. These are male bee eggs. brood, whereas the flat ones are the female workers. So again, it's an indication that when the queen has decided, thinking about swarming, she starts having males around, because otherwise it's a fairly female environment. When they've done a few days on the front door as security, they then become the forager bees, and they then fly out and they look for food. So that's either nectar for the adult bees or pollen for the baby bees. All I'm doing is putting a bit of smoke on here to move the bees away so I don't squish them. A beekeeper tries not to kill his bees, their bees. You don't want them to. Unfortunately, it can happen by accident. So, but they're just basically carrying on. I mean, you know, someone's burgling their house, and the ones that are actually working inside, they're just carrying on. The ones that are buzzing around their heads, they're the security, they're the guard bees. They're just making sure. There she is, there's the queen.
Oh yeah.
Alright, apart from the green paint on her back, which the bee breeder put, you can see she's longer in the abdomen. Okay, she's basically pregnant. And she can lay up to 2,000 eggs a day. And her sole job is to lay eggs. That's all she does. She can't feed herself, she can't wipe her own backside. The bees do it for her. So she's got these attendant bees that follow her around. There we go. She's quite shy. And this is another queen cell, which we'll just destroy. So all these work, they're all doing their various jobs. The queen, when I put her back, she'll start laying eggs again. She doesn't like being in the daylight. The only time a queen will fly out of the hive is first in her life, when she's first born, she has to become mated. So she goes on a mating flight, and then she meets quite a few male bees, and they have a bit of a mid-air orgy. She meets about 15 to 20 male bees, and then she has basically enough sperm stored inside her to last 3 to 5 years, laying up to 2,000 eggs a day. In the winter she doesn't lay any, but this time of the year she's laying up to 2,000 eggs a day. And you can tell this one's a strong queen because it's a strong brood pattern. There's no real gaps, and the gaps that are there follow a wire that runs through the wax, which gives it rigidity and support. So, as I say, here we are, basically breaking into their home, and they are just carrying on doing what comes naturally. So this entire area is where they're going to live. In this particular hive, there's not many male bees because she's only just potentially going to start thinking of swarming. And that green paint on her back, which that was the colour of it, means she was a queen from last year. So I don't know if there's actually many, if any, male bees in here. There's probably 1 or 2, but there's not many. All a male bee does is mate. That's their sole purpose in life. They also can keep the hive warm in colder periods because they've got a slightly bigger body mass, but they're basically for reproduction. So during the day, a male bee either feeds, goes flying around looking for queens to mate with, or just chills really. He can live up to sort of 3 or 4 months. If he mates with a queen, that's actually the end of him, because what happens is the queen flies past, he jumps on her back, and after the act of congress, his manhood snaps off and he falls to the ground dead basically. It's all over for him. So in here, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but you can actually see larvae in there.
There's a bigger bee there as well in the middle.
Yes, there we go, thank you very much. That's a male bee. So apart from the fact he looks like he's on steroids, he's actually got larger eyes. Not sure if you can see that, there's another one there. Yeah. And basically what that is for is when they try and see the queen. Yeah. But these are all female workers, so all he's actually doing is just getting in the way really. But say, in a hive of 50,000 bees, there's one queen. She's the only fertilised one, and she's the only one that can lay eggs. There's a couple of hundred males, maybe 1,000 at peak season, and the other 49,000 are all female workers doing various jobs. And again, I'm not sure we're going to pick it up, but in there are eggs. So if I hadn't, as a beekeeper, if I hadn't actually seen the queen, I would have known that a queen had been in here very recently, because eggs are eggs for 3 days. They then become maggots for another 5 days, and then they're capped over, as we saw before, like this. They're capped over where basically the maggot pupates, and it effectively becomes a baby bee, and then it hatches out, and that hatches out around day 20, 21. A queen takes 16 days, and a drone takes about 21 days. So quickly, that's the life cycle. I will just show you what happens when a mouse gets in. Because I knew I was doing this, I deliberately haven't changed it. That's my excuse.
So how often do you check the hives?
Once a week in swarm season, because it takes about 8 to 9 days to form a swarm cell, and they swarm. So you check it every 8-9 days, and then if they are making swarm cells, you've got a chance to do something about it. Because it takes 5 minutes in a hive check to sort it out.
Yeah.
It'll take you a couple of hours if you can catch them. Nobody wants their hives to swarm, but it does happen, unfortunately. I'm as guilty as the next person. Right,
Oh,
that's
there.
what happens when a mouse goes in a hive. It chews huge holes. So this doesn't upset them as much as you might think. This lighter wax here is actually where they're trying to fill the void. So some of the bees, when they're at a certain age, exude little wax granules, flakes, sorry, and this is how they make all of this. This wire that's in here was the original wax that I put in there. It's been chewed away now by the mouse, so they're trying to fill the gap. What I will do is change that over. You also see the different colours. When a queen lays an egg in a cell, as the process goes through and the egg becomes a maggot, becomes a pupae, and it pupates, there's a skin left behind. And this skin, as it builds up, it starts to make the wax go black. Plus also the bees have actually got dirty feet, so where they walk over the wax, they make it grubby. So when we get a lot of black wax, which I've got one I prepared earlier, we remove it. So you see this is quite black. Okay, and that's a bit cleaner. Some of this can almost be jet black, so we take that away, we clean up all the frames and reuse them, and we put fresh wax in there. It's also to stop disease. But a queen will lay an egg in an individual cell only about 10 or 12 times, and after that she doesn't do it anymore. Because what the actual worker bees will do is polish the inside. So they polish the inside of the cell so that the queen actually drops the egg in there. But as I say, after a while it starts closing down. And there's another male. The patterning on the worker bees is all slightly different because she mates with 10 to 20 or 15 to 20 different male bees. Depending who the father is, depends on his genes. So most of these are fairly uniform, but if you look closely you can actually see different patterns. Some of the purebred bees, the pattern is exactly the same, but on this particular one, because she's what's called a buckfast queen, that's the name of it, she's sort of a mongrel breed that's been bred for various things, that they're calm, they bring in a lot of food, and also they don't swarm very often, but they're actually a mix of lots of different subspecies of bees. So, and this one here, not sure if you can see it, but she's actually got pollen on her back legs. She's been hidden there. So when a bee goes out to fly somewhere, they go out with the intention of either bringing back nectar in their honey stomach, or they go out with the intention of getting pollen. They won't go for both. And the other thing is, when a honeybee flies out, if he goes after, or she goes after, a particular sort of flower, that's all their visit on that trip. So if they're just going after lavender, they will only visit lavender flowers. They won't hop over and get a lime tree or something like that. On the next journey they may well do. But they actually, I'm going to put this back together now. As I say, I can go through the whole thing, but I don't want to bore everyone. but we've seen the 3 castes of bees that's in there: the female workers, the male drones, and the fertilised queen. And they are basically a superorganism. They need each other. Okay, if there's no males, the queen can't get mated. If there's no queen, there's no eggs. And if there's no worker bees, no work gets done. So they need each other, and they actually work as a social grouping.
So are they born like each of those types, or
Yes,
do they
are.
become
Yeah, they
that?
are born. A male bee is actually from an unfertilised egg.
Okay.
So when the queen lays the egg, she deliberately doesn't fertilise it on the way through her tubes. A female worker and a queen are still basically the same egg, same fertilised egg. But what happens, the queen larvae is only fed royal jelly, and that's it. And there's something in the royal jelly that actually changes her DNA and her gene structure, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not an expert on that bit. And actually makes her a queen, whereas all the other bees only get 1 day's worth of royal jelly. And the royal jelly is again produced by the worker bees. They produce the wax through glands, they produce the royal jelly. There is some honey on this, but not much, because as I say, they're a bit behind. Some of the hives I've got have actually got over £100 of honey on already. I will hope to get on average about £50 of honey off of these this year. Fingers crossed. We've had the rain, the flowers are starting to come out now. So we just wait and see now, really. But from the bees' perspective, they're all in good shape. They will all survive through to the autumn. And as long as I prepare them properly for the winter, there's no reason why they won't survive. The fact that I made a bit of a mistake by not putting mouse guards on last autumn means that as the beekeeper, I'm the one that won't be able to harvest as much honey. The other thing with honey harvesting is honeybees in a good year produce too much honey to survive. They need about 40 to 50 pounds of honey to survive the winter. So what a beekeeper will do is take off the excess, which is what I do. Some beekeepers do rob them of everything and then replace it with sugar water. But each one of these boxes here holds about 25 pounds of honey. So by the end of the season, that will be solid with honey that I won't touch. And I know there'll be 25 pounds of honey in there. And in the bottom box, there's probably going to be 5 or 10. So going into the winter, I know there's about 40 pounds of honey, 35 to 40 pounds of honey. I don't tend to feed mine sugar water. It's a bit like feeding people on fast food. You can enjoy it, but you can't really live on it. But I do put fondant bags on, and it's not cheap baker's fondant, it's actually a special mixed one, a bit like a high quality pet food. And that's to see them through the winter in case there's ever going to be a problem. So what I do going forward is hopefully put some more of these boxes on. They can fill one of these boxes with £20 of honey in a week. Each worker bee in its lifetime only brings back about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. Because you've got 50,000 bees in there on a constant cycle, it does actually come in. As I say, they get a rough lifetime of 6 weeks, and in that 6 weeks they do everything there is to do in the hive. Queen can live 3 to 5 years, drones can live 3 or 4 months unless they mate and then they're dead. So it's a fairly short life basically for a worker bee. In the winter, a worker bee can actually live 3 to 4 months, which is why they're able to actually survive a winter period. In a nutshell, that's beekeeping. The smoker kept going, which is good. From a beekeeping perspective, we now go and wash all the kit down. Well, that looks a bit manky. We do actually wash it down so there's no disease transfer, because that can happen. Unfortunately, you can't see it, a bit like the virus at the moment. You can't see it, but it's there sometimes, and it's more likely that a beekeeper is going to transfer it from his clothing, his hive tool or something. So we tend to wash that down in caustic soda solution, and it kills everything. And that's why everything's sterilised, and if a hive dies over the winter and you don't know why, you tend to burn all the contents just in case it was disease that did it. These marks here, slightly gory, but that's actually an indication, that's diarrhoea, bee diarrhoea. But that's because they were stressed over the winter when the mice came in. Okay, it wasn't disease that got them. You'll see it on a couple of them. In like everything, in bad cases, it can actually kill them completely.
Yeah.
It's just again another sign to a beekeeper as an indicator. But that's it. They live in a box. Normally they'd live in a tree. Unfortunately, there's a parasite called varroa, which is like a little leech, and it sticks onto them and it sucks their life fluids out. That was imported from Asia in the 90s, and it's now in every hive. And the reason you don't see many feral colonies is because ultimately it wears them down and they die. Not necessarily the varroa themselves, but all the other diseases they're going to get. And you've probably heard of the Asian hornet, again another import from Asia. Came through some terracotta pots on a ship. It's landed in south of France, it's worked its way through Europe. It's in Jersey and Guernsey. It's only a matter of time, unfortunately, before it comes over here. There's another thing called a small hive beetle. Again, it's in southern Italy at the moment. We're on the lookout for that. If that comes over, it ruins bees. So some people don't think it's right to keep bees in a box, and I can understand the argument. But unfortunately, nowadays, if they weren't in a box, they'd be struggling, seriously struggling. Honeybees are the only bee species, and there's over 250 in the UK, that are actually holding their own. And that is in the main, thanks to beekeepers looking after them. The bumblebees, the solitary bees, they're not doing so well. You do hear people saying that there's less honeybees, there'd be more other bees. It's not actually the case, unfortunately. If there were more flowers, arguably less people, a bit controversial, but then there'd be more wildlife. So bees are doing okay at the moment, honeybees, because of beekeepers and the people that allow them to do it. And as long as you're not greedy, and you don't strip them of all their food, then they can live a fairly normal life and be looked after. So really all I do as a beekeeper is if they're hungry, I will feed them. If they're ill, I'll treat them. But apart from that, I just let them get on with it. And the only reason I check them weekly to stop them swarming, which is a natural process, is it upsets people, it upsets neighbours. It's quite a spectacular sight, but you don't really want them going down your chimney or in your cavity wall. So we check them weekly. Other people have got different opinions, that's mine. It's not necessarily 100% right, but it's what I believe in. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's beekeeping.
Thank you so much, Richard. That's been fascinating and really great for our viewers. Really enjoyed that. So thank you very much for your time and looking after these lovely bees at Growing Together Westcliff.